Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so just recording this in case anybody has to jump early or can't make it. But yeah, thanks so much for inviting me and the One Valley team. I always love, supporting the startup community. So just give you like quick background on myself. I'm currently based in Denver, Colorado. I'm originally from Chicago. Love playing tennis as far as activities go. I used to, early in my career, worked for the NBA as a partner manager, and then moved over into tech, where I worked at Techstars for 2.5 years, where I managed our global network partnership program and Perks platform. I've been with HubSpot for a little over a year now, where I manage our West Coast operations. That's a picture of myself and my daughter, who is now 2. So that's a little bit, she's a little bit bigger than that now. So yeah, feel free to add in the chat any questions you have. I'm happy to answer those. I'll add my email here later on in case anybody wants to connect with me or ask questions post our conversation today. So for those of you who don't know about the HubSpot for Startups program, so being a part of the One Valley community, you have access to up to a 90% discount on our software. So I'm going to add the link to the chat that you can use if you're interested in accessing that discount. We also offer over 1,100 app integrations, a ton of content around marketing, sales, and service. So definitely check that out. We have a really great startup program and some great resources for those who need that. So today we're going to cover 3 pillars when it comes to supercharging your fundraising process. And the framework is pretty simple, right? It starts with attract. So you want to find ways for more investors to find out and learn about you, right? And then engage, you want to identify those investors and look at those investors looking at you and engage directly with them. And then close, you want to make sure no money is left behind unless you choose to, obviously. So these are going to be really the 3 key areas we look at when it comes to really focusing on managing your investing while using a CRM. So if anybody's like currently fundraising or maybe thinking about fundraising, hopefully you really get some good information about what we're going to be discussing today. So to start, fundraising is a full-time job, right? And when you're actively fundraising, it really feels like that's the only thing you work on all day, every day, right? But you're also managing your company, your employees, your social media, your content, and then obviously like our personal lives as well. So you're managing and juggling a lot in your lives as a founder. But it's not like you can go, sorry, investor, I'm going through a sprint right now and I can't talk, because you don't want to lose those opportunities to engage, right? And at this point, some of you, especially who are going, through seed or fundraising for their first time, you might ask yourself, what the heck do or where the heck do I begin, right? And that's what this session is for. We're here to get you on that right track and to provide those tools and resources to set you up for success as you're looking to fundraise. So first off, diving in, we want to start by going over, who the players are in the market, right? So we have 3 main categories. The first are those angel investors. The second are VC firms, and the third are going to be your public and private lenders. And we're not going to be focusing much on the public and private lenders today. Those are typically, government organizations or banks who are giving you loans. We want to talk about, gaming capital from angel investors. So those individuals who invest in your company in exchange for some type of ownership or equity. And then VC firms who do the same, but they're actually a group of people who invest using the private funds they've raised. So now that you know the players, I want to start by sharing, 4 steps to getting more money, right? So as we attract, as we engage, and as we close, we need to, 1, make sure we're prepared, right? And then 2, you want to create your pitch and tell your story, which is super important and something I'll go into a little bit later. And then 3, determine your ask. And then that leads us to number 4, which is to keep track of your investor pipeline. So as we attract, as we engage, and as we close, we want to keep these steps in mind, but we'll spend a majority of our time on that last step, right? Which is keeping track of your investor pipeline. So I'll take you into our CRM a little bit, and I'll show you how to manage it with a variety of our different features. But before we get into, talking about step number one, which is being prepared, some of this, might seem elementary if you've already gone through fundraising, if you've raised already, so I'll try to, go through this as quick as I can. But for some of those who haven't raised before, this is recorded. I'll make sure I'll share some further details on that. So step one, preparing before raising your funds, right? So there's a saying, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, right? And that's true with fundraising as well. So creating a business opportunity is the whole purpose when going forth to investors. You want to create an opportunity, and of course, there's a risk in every investment, but positioning your business as a positive opportunity rather than as a risk, that's going to be step number one, and it's going to allow you to raise those funds. So the way that you do that with presenting yourself as an opportunity is by demonstrating feasibility. So how easy is it for you to go to market or for your users to implement your products or solutions? So you also want to focus on another thing, which is product readiness, right? Do you have a beta? Have you launched a 1.0 version of it? Maybe you haven't just yet. Well, if that's the case, have you evaluated your product market fit? And for those of you who've run businesses before, tell the investors, demonstrate that team composure, that you have the operating history as a business leader, right? And so one of the top things when I was at Techstars that we would always tell the founders and work with them on is, did we believe the founders and the team? And sometimes that was even more important than the product, right? And of course, investors love to see traction. So if you have any, pre-sales or engagement with users, potential users, that's always going to be beneficial as well. And step two is creating your story or your pitch, right? Investors invest not just in your business, but in your vision, your practicality, and as an individual, like I was saying earlier. So you want to use your pitch to build that trust, which is so important, and something we always really share with the founders is that story is going to be a big part of that, right? So some key components to include when creating your pitch are going to be, sharing information about your team. Who are you? Why are you the one most qualified to lead this business? What problem are you solving? The solution, right? And then the different, market opportunities or financial projections that you have. One of the things too, after this talk, I'll send you all a free pitch deck that you can use as you're thinking through your fundraising as well. So to highlight, just believe in yourself and really focus on how powerful of a team you have, because that's really going to resonate with those investors that you're looking to work with. And then going into step three, determining your ask, right? What's the right amount of money to ask investors for? So there's going to be a lot of questions that you can ponder when you're coming up with your ask. But the first three should be, which round of funding are you in? Are you in pre-seed? Are you in seed? Are you in Series A? And once you narrow in on that, what's the average investment size for your industry that others have received at your phase in funding? And then lastly, do you have a minimum investment requirement? Some people, will go with investments that are, $5K here, $5K there. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just takes a lot of time. So evaluate, the time and resources that you have and what you're willing to invest in return for the investor's capital. And then now this is going to be the meat of the discussion that we're talking about today. And that's step number 4, right? Keeping track of your investor pipeline. So in order to do that, I'm going to show you, how to keep track of your investor pipeline in a CRM. So your CRM is going to help you, organize and outline things like, who you want to speak to. So individuals, maybe it's the individual angels, the firms, the VC firms, and maybe the contacts at those firms. It may even be, you know, any accelerators that you're potentially looking at if you're still in that ideation phase. And then beyond that, we also want to understand the insight into those investors, right? And you can house that all within a CRM. And so also, things like, you know, what's the average investment size at the firm you're most interested in receiving funds from gives? That's another thing you could look at tracking. Do they typically invest in B2B or B2C companies? And then regarding funding stage, do they typically invest in companies that are at your stage? And then how engaged are these investors with your startups, right? You know, we work with a variety of partners. We have about 4,000 partners that we work with at HubSpot. And, you know, I've seen some that are very active in the development of their startups. You know, they're helping them raise their next round of capital, hiring, you know, growing their board members, while some of them, you know, they're maybe not as active, right? So it's important to understand, you know, what type of relationship do you want to have moving forward with your investors? And then lastly, of course, you want to keep track of your process, right? So who have you reached out to? What types of conversations have you had? Who have you secured funds from? And you can use different systems like Crunchbase, you know, to find these types of investors, but it's important and really important to house them in one centralized locations like a CRM, because that's going to be, you know, something where you could track everything and make sure you're staying organized. So on the right of the screen, you know, I really want to just quickly highlight, you can see, you know, the funnel and then the flywheel, right? Because when we look at it, this is because raising funds is like sales, right? You're moving everything through a funnel where we're talking about attracting, engaging, nurturing, and ultimately converting those investors into investors of your company, right? And then on the right side is the flywheel. And so this is really the core of HubSpot. When you're thinking about HubSpot, we really think of it as a flywheel, right? It's ultimately, you know, what helps us to function, because it's a methodology that puts the customers, or in this case, the investors first, throughout the entire fundraising cycle. So whether someone, you know, is familiar with your brand before and ready to invest now, or if they've never heard of you before, but you know that they're a good fit, we want to meet them where they're at, right? So that way we can develop our content. You can develop your messaging, develop your outreach to fit how exposed they are to your brand. So very similar to sales in that, and just keep that in the back of your pocket, you know, as we move through this. So let's dive into the actual tools. Again, the demos I'm going to be showing you are specific to HubSpot, which you can sign up for free with the link I shared in the chat. But obviously, we want you to just make sure you're choosing the product that's best for you, whether it be HubSpot or anything else that's out there. We just want to make sure that you're being successful as you're managing your fundraising process. So step one, like I said, access your discount, use a free CRM, get set up there. That's going to be step one in terms of getting set up with the CRM. Step two, importing your data. So these are all the companies or contacts you've already spoken to. Maybe you house them, you know, in Excel, a Google Sheets, a Google Doc, or another CRM. We want to have all of this information in a centralized system, like I was saying earlier, right? Because with a CRM, you're going to be able to view records for each contact with each company, right? So things like their email, their first name, their last name, their firm they're representing, any notes or engagements with any of your team members that they've had, this will all be housed in one individual record. So by importing these specific contacts, we'll then be able to create records for each of them as you're importing them, right? And you could do this by uploading that CSV file or Excel file, or just by syncing your current system with a CRM. And with HubSpot, it's a super easy step-by-step process that we walk you through when you're trying to import that data. So that's usually one of the top questions I get is, you know, how difficult is it to import our data if we're using a CRM, or if I have all my data in Google Doc? It's really easy, and we walk you through that whole process. And that's one of the benefits of being in the startup program is that onboarding process is we help you sync all your data there. And then step 3 is syncing your email, right? So you may be thinking, that's a privacy violation, but we'll note that your emails that sync to your CRM are specific to contacts who are already in your CRM, right? So if by accident, you have any personal emails that are being sent to you, those will not be tracked within the CRM. It'll just be emails to potential investors who have been saved to your CRM. But this is key, right? We have a lot of conversations daily, weekly, yearly, so we want to make sure that nothing is falling through cracks. And this is what it'll look like to sync to your email. And you can see here, as you're actually creating an email, you can also leverage features from your CRM like templates, sequences, to help you automate your communication a little bit more, that I'll get into later. And this email will be directly tracked to your CRM without having to click on any buttons outside of that track check mark. So it automates that process for you. So you're having your email do the work for you, rather than having to manually do it every time you're sending an email. So now you're ready to grow your pipeline, right? You have these 3 easy steps to get started, which is, activating or finding a CRM that works for you, importing your data, and then connecting your CRM to your email. Super easy to get up and started. And then going back to those 3 key pillars of attracting, engaging, and closing, I want to talk a little bit about how to do each of these 3 within a CRM, right? So first, with attracting, the purpose is to get your company in front of more investors, right? Very simple. Introduce your brand to those investors you're interested in, use content, share your stories as much as you can. And one thing to note when doing that is to know who your persona is. So just like in sales or marketing, you're going after a specific investor persona. So how does this person think, right? What do they do for work? Where do they frequent? And by frequent, I mean, not showing up at their house. I mean, are they on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, seeing where they frequently visit as far as social goes. And then think about these things so you can show up where they are and feed them timely and relevant content. So important, that content piece when it comes to connecting with these investors. And then that being said, going back to where they show up, right? Think about where they are and double down on that, but also be realistic of, with your time and resources that you have, right? So number 1 is that audience piece. Sometimes startups are asking, where are the investors at? Well, think about it. Social platforms, right? Example, it has to have a purpose, right? So with Facebook, we know it's very common to share personal photos. So maybe not the most professional lens, but whereas places like LinkedIn are a bit more professional, and also Twitter, where a lot of investors spend their time. And it's not always that intuitive, but once you're actually on the platform, it's very obvious that investors are visiting the site to remain up to date, on what's happening with various industries. And it's a great place to start. If you're looking to engage with investors, or you're simply trying to, follow their presence and keep up with their news. And the second piece is time. So once you narrow in on your investor persona, where they frequent, and what type of content they like to engage with, it's important to understand, the time that you and your team can actually devote towards creating a social media strategy. If you can't cover, 5 channels, that's okay. It's oftentimes more important to start with less. So this is absolutely, one of those instances where less is going to be more. So start with 1 or 2 channels, if that's all your team has bandwidth for. And then the third piece is going to be resources, right? So what personnel and skills do you have that you can actually apply and put to work in this social strategy component of raising funds? So because again, this is very different from the people who may be calling investors, speaking with them, or meeting with them in person. So there's going to be multiple components when it comes to selecting your channel and deciding what the best route is for you to take. So going back to social media real quick, of course, email marketing is great as well. And that's a big part of what HubSpot does. But your social media can also be managed within your CRM, right? So it's important to know that you can create social media content within HubSpot. So if you're looking to connect with your investors on social media or put out more content, you can organize that and track all your engagement within a CRM. So super important to thin that. And then the last thing I wanted to cover on this with social media is to repurpose your content. So important with that is, do not invent the wheel when it comes to, putting out content for each social channel. Continue to use the same blogs or infographics or ebooks. If you have content that's dense, use it across the different platforms. Obviously, play with the language a bit as you're communicating to people in these different channels. But one of the biggest, just to give you an example, one of our largest content pieces that we use at HubSpot is we repurpose content because a lot of it's valuable, and founders, if you're repurposing it, it's obviously going to be something that founders are really engaging with. So super important as you're looking at. And then one thing that I wanted to cover here is, so once you've gotten, word out about your brand, it's important to identify who you've attracted to your site, right? Or to your company. You can go into your CRM and pull a full list of the companies, the firms, your contacts, etc. And then once you have that list, it's time to truly engage with them, right? So when you're engaging, you want to make sure that you make it easy for your investors to reach out to you. And how do you do that? Well, it's by personalized outreach, right? So when personalizing your engagement, you can use a CRM to manage your outreach and workflows by having the data stored in a contact record, which you can see in this example here on the right. So for this example, we have Hyper, and we can link their LinkedIn profile to their contact record, right? We can view their specific contact record, but we can also see, how did they hear about us? Which channel did we leverage to see them? And on the bottom, we can see within the orange circle, we could see the organic search was the area, was the source where they found us through. So you're able to really find and gather all this details and see, where are these investors finding our information. And another example is knowing that we, only did advertising on Google search. We can get a sense that Google is one place where Hyper and investors like Hyper are spending their time. Thus, we could ramp our resources to that area. So that's why it's so important for you to be able to see this data, because you could, have those resources targeted to those areas where those investors are spending time. So a CRM, it helps you centralize that information. It creates that transparency and allows you to identify what's working, so you could scale that outreach. So once we have all this information, we know where to reach them, who to reach, and how we can reach others who are like them. So I want to talk a little bit about, engaging investors in different ways. Social media is one that I noted. I'd love to hear if anybody on the call is using chatbots on their website or have used chatbots. So feel free to add that in the chat. And I would love to hear if anybody's using that. Or if you are, I'd love to hear how you're using chatbots for your investor process. So another way, like I was saying, another way to engage investors is through things like chatbots or regular chats. So chats versus chatbots. If you use a tool like HubSpot, we have both. And these are some examples of how those look on our platform. So you can see them side by side. And we found through studies across customers and our customers in various industries that HubSpot chatbots drive 2 times more conversions than chats alone. Right. So the idea is that people enjoy having that more dynamic interaction with your company rather than being directly sold to. And in this case, our discussion is around, do you want to invest in us, right? It gives the investor a bit more time to warm up to you because they may know who you are, but they may not understand how you fit into their ecosystem as of yet. So having chats and chatbots set up, it really helps that initial engagement with investors so that when you do start to have conversations with them, you have enough detail to really customize your outreach and discussions with them. So social media, chatbots, or regular chats are other, those are going to be another way, other ways to manage and engage with your investors. But the most common initial engagement we see with startups would have to be with forms, right? So it's important that within your website, you want to make sure that your landing page has that direct call to action. So then those investors can engage with you while you're sleeping, right? Because that's the best time to really make money is while you're sleeping, because you wake up, there's a bunch of people who want to talk to you, right? So if you have those forms, like I was saying earlier with those email templates or automation, those forms are doing the work for you, right? And forms can also be created and managed within a system like a CRM. So this is an example with a company called Biglytics that has a company form, which includes their pitch deck, has a call to action. So once an investor makes it to this page, they heard of the brand. Two, they have been engaged with you in some shape or form through content, for an example. And then three, this is going to turn into a conversation, which is essential, right? Because that's what you want to have is like I was saying earlier, you have these forms to do the work for you, and it turns that work into a conversation with those investors, right? Because that means an investor says that they not only have heard of you, but I am interested in connecting and learning more about your company to possibly invest. So creating forms that allows investors to convert on a site, and it's very easy to set up within a CRM if you're thinking about using one. So now that we're tracking the pipeline, remember to really track that success and pipeline. You're going to be identifying those investors you want to engage with. You're converting through chatbots and then converting through things like forms. So as you're setting up your website or thinking about really ramping up your investor efforts, think about these things and think about, am I doing this on my website currently? How can I incorporate this to get more visibility into my company as I'm looking to fundraise? So now let's talk about that. One of the more exciting parts, right, is about closing these investors. So what's most important is that you make these investors aware of your brand and then close them, right? Meaning you're actually getting them to invest in your business. So in order to do that, we have to build a reliable process that gains that investor's commitment and buy-in so that nothing, really falls through the cracks. Whether it's an email or lack of conversion, we want to make sure that you have all your bases covered as you're looking to close these investors. So this is a quick example of how HubSpot nurtures through automation, but we're going to obviously cover it through the realm of investors. So we want to nurture investors with automation, right? So HubSpot, when converting customers, we'll send out a variety of different assets, right? As you can see for this example, there's some marketing kits, social media, there's an assessment. So we try to really draw people in through the content, right? And it each allows, each of this content or resources allows a given buyer, or in your case, an investor, an opportunity to engage depending on their level of comfort with the brand, right? Because you have to build trust with these investors just as you would with a customer to help move them along their investor's journey, which mirrors that of the buyer's journey. So this is how our automation would look like for HubSpot outreach, but I want to show you obviously how it looks when you're going through that investor outreach. So nurturing with automation with a CRM starts with number one is going to be templates, right? So creating templates are going to be those standardized messaging that can actually be personalized. But you might, be thinking in your head, how is standardized and personalized? They don't really seem to go hand in hand, right? But the way you do this if you see in this example, there's these orange and green fields within the message, and we call these personalization tokens. So how these typically work is you have the black text, which is standard, right? It's there, but you can personalize it by dropping in these specific personalized tokens. So if you have a customized link or a deck that you want to share for a specific investor, you can drop it within these templates. So you're standardizing that messaging, but you're also automating that messaging, right? And maybe, you customize it by adding their brand logo, as going one step further, because that's going to go a long way, because you're not just sending out a generic email to these investors. You want to be able to personalize it as much as you can. So dropping in these personalization tokens are really going to make those investors feel like, you're really personalizing that messaging to them. Super important as you're thinking through these templates and how you can personalize your messaging more. Another, and going a little bit further than that, another way to nurture through automation is through sequences. So with sequences, it takes templates and it compiles them, right? So we think of templates as being one message that can be sent out to a number of investors, but sequences allows you to insert multiple templates so that you can have multi-touch cadences with these investors without going in and manually sending those, 4 messages you want to get out. So a sequence, and kind of going a little bit further details on this, can include both emails as well as, reminders, as seen in this. So like follow-up tasks you can use for sequences. So it really helps you automate that process even further than just those standardized templates that I was showing earlier. And then with to-dos, as you're thinking through your investor process and you're emailing and creating automation, obviously you want to have reminders on like what step you're at in the investor process. So with sequences, you can have those follow-up tasks, you can have those follow-up emails, so you can kind of, leave it and forget it, and it's doing the work for you. So like I was saying earlier, you could focus on your other aspects of your business and make the software do the work for you. Another way to nurture with automation is with workflows. So workflows are an awesome feature because they're so dynamic, right? And that being said, you can see here, just as an example, this is a lead nurturing campaign. So ultimately, workflows allows you to create if-then workflows or processes. So an example, if we're looking at it through the lens of an investor, is, if an investor clicks on your site from search they saw earlier, then they would receive a lead nurturing email, which then introduces your startup to them, expressing your level of interest in their firm to invest in you, and then potentially offering a time to connect. So it's walking them, you're setting up a workflow where it's walking them through the whole sales process, and it's automating that process for you. So it started, as a click on Google, then put them into an email sequence. And then if they respond to that, then they're sent a link that allows them to automatically connect with one of your founders or one of your leadership team members. So it's allowing you to set up these automatically multi-step phases. And sometimes if you want to take the human out of it, a workflow may be sending, one email and then putting them in a different category as far as, the social media that you targeted them with. But ultimately, the idea is you are being dynamic and you're reaching those personas where they are, depending on how they are engaging with your startup. So that's even so that's taking it a little bit further than that sequence side. So I want to talk a little bit about structuring your pipeline. So this is probably the most important part, and it mirrors really closely to a sales process. So if you have a sales pipeline structure, you may want to look there and see what that structure looks like. And what that means is ultimately you have a set number of stages in your investor pipeline, right? So stage 1 may be prospecting or simply, you're looking for new investors. Another might be the exploratory or discovery meeting. That's going to be your first call or in-person meeting with them. And then lastly, of course, is going to be that closed won process. Did they actually invest? and how much. So you want to structure your pipeline so that you're able to manage your pipeline as efficiently and effectively as possible. And like I said, we have a good amount of startups marrying their sales pipeline structure because it's easier for them to manage because you have that process already built out. And the way you structure your pipeline even more effectively and efficiently is by prioritizing your investors, right? So this is an example of various investors at different stages of an investor pipeline. And you can see we have 3 investors in the prospecting phase where there's only 1 in the exploratory meeting phase and then 1 in the negotiating terms phase, right? But what's awesome about that is you can also use our views feature to prioritize. Do you care about the average investment size? Yes, you do, right? So that's something you can prioritize by, or you can prioritize it by the last touch or who engaged with your startup brand the most recently. You ultimately want to use these views to prioritize your investors appropriately. So it's a good way to just have a really global view of what your investor pipeline looks like. And then we see here, holistically, a bird's eye view of what an efficient fundraising system can look like. So once you've attracted, engaged, and actually are now looking to manage your pipeline, you can use reports to understand the process and identify any bottlenecks that you've run into so that you can ultimately, in the end, scale what's working and optimize what's not working, right? So to the so that point, in the upper left-hand corner, we can see a graphic showing us the overall deal forecast. And then this is representative of the full funding amount that closed over a given quarter. So you can see, the full funding amount, which is great, but you can also see, did you hit your goal? Did you miss it by X number? It gives you a great bird's eye view of your metrics. And then if you're looking at the left-hand corner, you can see the time that each deal or investor spent in each of your pipeline phases. Again, essential for understanding what's working and what's not working. And then sometimes there's bottlenecks in simply being able to prospect, right? Because you don't know who to find, and that's a whole other conversation. But other times there's just a bottleneck there's just a bottleneck when it comes to converting after the discovery conversation into a closed deal. And when you can identify what's working, you can replicate, wash, rinse, and repeat, right? So anything that's working, you can see what's not working and figure out, where do I need to really refine my process, right? And then in the upper right-hand corner, we could see the deal stage funnel, same idea, but it tells us another key piece of information, which is conversion rates. It's essential to know what your conversion rate is at each phase, because you can use that to calculate the number of investors you should be reaching out to. So for example, you can see in the upper right-hand corner that the cumulative conversion, so the average conversion rate for driving qualification call with investors is 20%. If we know the conversion rate is a 20% rate, then we can calculate backwards the number of investors we need to reach out to in a given quarter or month, depending on how quickly you're going to drive traction and actually build that strong pipeline that's going to allow you to raise the amount of funds for your next initiative or timeline. So this is going to be reporting, and it's important to know that with reporting, you could customize these reports based on what data is most important to you. So that's going to be your, so that's your whole team. You could discuss with your team, like what's important, and this can be all customized based on like what you want to see. So how many calls your team made, how many notes, is that important? So really think about that as you're building out your reports. And with that, now you're ready to scale through automation. So some tips just for this portion is nurture your contacts through automation, optimize your outreach, personalize your pipeline with things like those templates and sequences I discussed, and then set up your views to actually prioritize the different pipelines. And then lastly, leverage reports for improvement. So important because it gives your team all of that data in one space. You're not having to go within, Google Docs or multiple Excel spreadsheets. It's all housed within one system. And then bringing it all back for us. Remember that the core pillars as you're thinking about your fundraising are going to be attract, get your startup in front of more investors, engage, make it easy for investors to engage with you and grow your database, and then close, right? Build that reliable process to get that investor commitment and make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And with that, happy fundraising. I hope everybody has success this year, and happy to answer any questions for anybody that's joined. And thanks for everybody for adding their LinkedIn profile. I'm definitely happy to connect. And Mark, I think you had a question here. I will definitely take your email and make sure to send you the presentation and some pitch decks as well. So yeah, any questions, or anybody like to, I don't know if anybody could go off mute, but I will. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you in the HubSpot CRM, are you able to tag, like, is there a way to tag the kind of investor it is? I'm sorry, I might have missed it.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
Like, is it an angel and what they're interested in? I might have missed that.
Yeah, one of the benefits, great question also. One of the benefits is of our system is there's properties within HubSpot. So within the contact record or company record, where you could go in and tag it to how you know what investor it is, or who the investor is, where they're based. So you can have all these different properties that have more of that like personal information on the investor. So when you go into the company record, you're able to view all of that within one page. So you'll have their name, their email address, any social media channels they're on. You know, do they invest in seed or pre-seed, Series A? Like, what stage of funding do they most focus on? So you can have all of that information within your system.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So great question. Yeah. Anything else? I think if anybody wants to go off mute, if you had any questions, I'm going to add my email to the chat here. In case anybody has needs anything outside of this. Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff Hall has a question. He wants to know what is the cost of HubSpot?
Yeah.
I believe through One Valley you get a discount, but so if you go through this link here and put in the partner code, you should be able to get that discount, right?
Yep, exactly. So yeah, what you can do is you have access to up to 90% on our software. Typically, on average, we see startups spending between $50 to $200 a month in their first year with us, just depending on like what product you choose, what subscription you have, what level package. But typically on average, we see anywhere from $50 on the low end to $200 on that like high end. So, yep, JC, I'll be sure to share with you the presentation as well. So no worries on joining late. Yeah, any other questions? Happy to answer.
Emo has a couple of questions. I think we answered a few. One of the questions is, what are the benefits of joining the HubSpot community?
Yeah, so the benefits are obviously that discount. We offer a ton of resources. So if you go on to, and I'll share this in my email after today, is we offer like free pitch deck templates. We offer a ton of resources and content around, you know, how to scale and grow with a CRM. What are some sales, marketing, service best practices with startups? You get all of that access with our startup program. You also have access to discounted onboarding with us, academy courses. There's a ton of app integrations we have. So if you're using, you know, a CRM, you can integrate with a variety of applications that are out there. So you're not having to juggle, 50 different, apps that you're currently using with your company. You can house it into one system. So that's another benefit of being in the startup program, is you have access to those app integrations. And then we also, another thing is we host events like this. So we put on a ton of leadership discussions with HubSpot executives throughout the year, with regards to their, founder stories, things like that. So we offer a ton of content and resources on our website that I'll share. But the big part of it is obviously like our substantial discount that we offer startups. But one of the things too that's really cool recently that we've been doing is we love sharing founder stories. So if you're, a founder that's raising or has raised and you have a really cool story that you'd like to share, definitely email me. We put together a few founder story films recently on the founder journey. So love to highlight the work you're doing as well with our community. And that's another thing that we really like to highlight with our startup program. So. Sure, no. Yeah, anything else? And we have a few more minutes, but
yeah, good evening from Nigeria, West African time.
Oh,
so
nice.
I wanted to for the email you just mentioned, because that is interesting to me amongst every other thing you've said as well. What should be the subject of the email for easy identification by you?
You can just put in there like One Valley company, or you just highlight it like that, just so as a follow-up for the presentation, maybe like One Valley fundraising. And I'm pretty, like, if you email me, I'll be able to see it right away and make sure I get back to you. So think of me as like, either HubSpot obviously is large, we have over 75 employees. So think of me as like your quarterback within HubSpot too. So don't just think of me as like just HubSpot for startups. If you have questions, like even if you're a current customer, I'm always happy to be a resource to help you navigate our company if there's anything you need. So, but I would, as a subject title, if you just put One Valley, that would be super helpful. So.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Yeah, of course. Thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Anything else? Give it another minute. And then, yeah, like I said, I'll be, my email's there. Don't hesitate to reach out. Fundraising, I know, is obviously a big question this year. So I'll be sharing with you some resources after this call on things you can use as you're thinking about your fundraising efforts this year. So I'll be sharing a bunch of resources around that. So hopefully you have good success this year. Yeah, if not, Elena, do you want to close out? Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
I was talking on mute. I was saying,
oh, it's okay.
It's gonna be good. No, that's fine. I think it's going to be a good year. I'm hopeful. But yeah, and investors are still looking this year. So yeah. I'm pretty well, Walter, I want to thank you so much for coming today. This workshop has been very insightful. I think that's evident from the questions. They were very precise. I hope we can do this again. Again, Walter said that the recording will be available after the webinar. So if you don't hear from us shortly after, just look forward to that email. And he did leave his email in the chat. So if you want to reach out, any questions, feel free to reach out to Walter directly.
Yeah. Thanks, Elena. Appreciate it.
All right, you guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good rest of your day, everybody. Take care.